Good evening and welcome to Nerds and Night Gaming. As always, I'm Kit Thunder DJ, joined by
Fire 47
and Cherie Vandeliers.
All right, so first of all, we want to just welcome you all back to the show. It's been we're pretty close in time to another week since our last show. Lots of things have happened. So summer drought is over, so we've got 2 big game reviews as well as some upcoming games we may be interested in taking a look at. We're going to talk a little bit about movies, including kind of a off the radar movie that's been out this last couple of weeks that we finally got to see. The RWBY premiere, which happened, I believe, this last week, that Fire 47 will go over, as well as a few other bits of news. But first, as always, we want to shout out the guys at Real Spoilers. If you're a fan of, in-depth movie podcasts, then definitely check those guys out. Want to, once again, thank them all for counting us in their league of show shares and giving us a plug.
And I want to thank them for all of their attempts at pronouncing my name.
Right. As well as the number, keeping up with the number of times you've changed various page names that you share their show under.
I haven't changed it that many.
Right. Right. Okay, moving on. Anyway, so let's start with the fact, like I said, the summer drought in gaming is over. Finally, we're really getting into heavy game release now for Christmas. We picked up WWE 2K18, and we really got to own this review, Brandon, because I've been showing gameplay clips and everything else, and been teasing on the Real Spoilers League of Show Share page. I've been teasing reviews because there's a lot of gamers on there who are and wrestling fans. So you haven't really played it much, but you've seen it. What do you think, Fireheart?
So far it looks all right. The career mode I think you've been playing.
Yeah,
that one's probably where it's looking the weakest. Because I
disagree, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But I want to hear your point.
Well, I'm purely talking from just a graphical standpoint. They feel like they took a really lazy route with a lot of the character models and such.
Well, that has nothing to do with career. They're just lazy with some of the character models. That's going to be something I'm going to touch on in a minute.
Yeah, and it's I didn't see a lot. It does look really cool how you can actually move around and interact with just people.
Right.
In a normal setting, not fighting.
They totally went back to...
They went RPG style with it.
Well, they had this before. They actually had this back in the, I think, early SmackDown versus Raw days, and definitely in the just standalone SmackDown days. So this is... A lot of stuff in here that they're touting as new isn't really new, but we're finally getting some of the features that we loved back. Yes, one of the big ones is the My Career mode has been overhauled again. This is the second or third overhaul. It's a lot cleaner. There's a lot less crazy stuff going on that they're trying to shoehole in. There isn't being a Paul Heyman guy or working for the Authority. Now there's just quests, as they call them, or side actions you can do by interacting with people backstage that can help boost your superstar. There is obviously, again, the backstage angle where you go around talking to people. Very reminiscent of some of the earlier SmackDown vs. Raw and WWF SmackDown games. And, again, to touch back on the graphics problem I have, graphics aren't bad. And, the arenas look beautiful. They've really, really, really refined and rehomed the lighting engine. So, Bobby Roode's entrance looks spot on.
No, in the main game, it's beautiful, but I'm just talking
the graphics
that
are the same. Well, okay, yeah.
You look at the character models and they just look so
that's
PS2.
That's because they're in an area where they're using a more flat camera. I know what you're talking about now when you're roaming around backstage.
Right.
Plus, they've got almost everybody changed into the tap out clothes that they show them wearing whenever they show them doing anything at the performance center. It is sort of ground down a little bit. But that's not where the big sit in their graphics is. That's always been that way whenever they show them backstage because the lighting's off and it's not, and the movement's jerky because they're trying to move it in more of a third-person point of view. So that I'm not complaining about. What I'm complaining about is there is a lot of first-year stars in this game. And for those who know, there's this sort of trope in WWE games where you have your first-year graphics, especially for people who they didn't expect to have in the game. They're the ones that are the least realistic looking because they're kind of rushed to get into the game. And then it's always a joke of how much you look different in your second game, which is really sad for the people who only wind up being around for one game. Yeah. But let's dive into the gameplay just a little bit. And they have really wrapped up the AI. I always play on medium to just kind of learn what they tweak. And even with a creative character who, obviously I'm going to max out the stats on, I still have trouble holding my own against some of the higher ranked regular guys in the game because they're smarter on reversals. They actually play well to all of these styles that they've put in, and the slide bars between respectful and disrespectful, just prideful and cowardly and all that stuff. And really, if you're not careful, you can get pretty beat up trying to go up against the computer, even on just the out-of-box difficulty, because they're smart. Now, that doesn't mean you can't, very easily figure them out, and getting used to the blocking timing again will still work really well at breaking all that up. But compared to the last game, where even on hard, I was just beating people no problem.
I forget, did they still have the change where you basically couldn't keep pulling off reversal fests?
Yeah, they left that in, and I'm glad they did. I mean, yes, it's not as fun as in one area. It's not as fun back when you and I played,
right?
Where we'll just sit there, and it's literally, I think we chained together between the two of us like 12 or 13 reversals, just seeing if we could keep doing it because we had the timing down, like literally in our sleep.
Well,
just go click up, reverse, 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 just back and forth. And I mean, it was cool, but
it was a lot of fun between us, like just the banter we would create. But yeah. I mean, for an actual match, I understand.
Right, but it was really well done what they've done now for the sake of realism and trying to replicate. Like, this game, I think, has done the best of any, because the problem with any wrestling game is you're presenting a work as a shoot. Yeah. So, for those who aren't wrestling fans, basically, you're presenting something that's scripted and fake as real. Like, when you're wrestling in a video game, you're really wearing down your opponent to hit them with a big enough move to keep them down for a pin. That's how wrestling works. Or WWF wrestling especially. I'm booked to do all these moves, you're booked to do all these moves, we know where the finish is going to be. When we're told go home, that's what we do. Well, so making that make sense, and this is where you get a lot of these logic errors in wrestling games, like, oh my god, because I could select a finisher as a regular move, I just hit first move of the match and I'll just pull out of a hair. I just hit the Styles Clash on Fireheart's character and he popped right up, and then you throw somebody out of the ring and they'd sell for 5-10 seconds. It was just that mismatch in logical, what we would perceive as logic being people who watch the show, and they seem to have done a lot to try to correct that in this game, and it feels more fluid and it feels more like a realistic match, for better or worse. So they've added in a lot of elements to keep the match going. They brought back things like being able to move an opponent around the ring, like either by dragging them by their head or actually lifting them up and doing it in a carry style.
Yeah, I remember you could just do by like the one arm and leg.
Right. Yeah, that used to be all you could do. Now I could pick you up in like a body slam position, but instead of immediately throwing you down, I could carry you around the ring and then put you on the turnbuckle to set you up for the tree. Well, it's not now. Again, this is another feature that's returned from a past game. Actually, you could do that up into about the PS4 era of games where there was different, like any move that fit the criteria. Like, I could get you up for a chokeslam, and then rather than automatically dropping you, I could walk around the ring, and then if I got like close to the ropes, I could just throw you out of the ring that way.
Right.
They haven't, from what I've seen, and it could be just that I haven't had time to really figure out how to make it work, but from what I've seen, it isn't quite that smart yet. But we're getting there, and it's good because that was always a fun thing to do, especially again in like you playing your friends, just carrying your friend around the ring and be like, oh, here you go, and then just throwing them out of the ring with a choke slam.
Yeah.
Because again, it goes back to the humor of you would die from this. We're presenting this as a real fight, but yet here you are popping right back up in 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And a couple final thoughts here. The Creative Character Suite is really getting back to its glory days. They've
oh, for sure.
Yeah, they've added ways to really work well with uploaded images. They've cleaned that entire system up. Now you log in with your PlayStation Network or your Xbox Live account. There's no more pins where you've got to jot down this, 25-digit, or however, wasn't that many, but like 12-digit pin. It's very clean. It's very quick. It can remember your computer, so you can just upload, 10 character images at a time, get them all in, get your characters made, or your arena, or your custom build, or whatever you're wanting to do made.
All of them.
Yeah.
All of them.
If you're a fan of the Creative Character or Creation Suite models, that's really, really been overhauled. I've used that word too much. It's really, really been well done this time, and it's definitely offers a lot of options if you're someone like me who obsesses over every detail of your character, as the Real Spoilers group saw when I posted the Shadow Wrestler that I always do every year's first match, and then I just finished DJ tonight, so you may see some videos for that. And probably as the glorious start to Nerds at Night Season 3 on YouTube, we'll probably do a couple of matches.
Yeah.
And just kind of really do... Or I'm actually thinking about taking our gameplay videos off YouTube with all the hassle about sponsorships and stuff, I may look into Twitch and just start setting up live shows. I don't know yet. We'll see. All right, but that's enough about that. Another big release that we got our hands on was Shadows of War, sequel to Shadows of Mordor for the Lord of the Rings series. And, I mean, it's a lot more of the same in a good way. They did sort of change up, like, now rather than just have your one weapon and the dagger and finding these little, like, sigils to put in them to make them change, you can actually find new weapons now, as well as add gems to them. So, I mean, it doesn't change graphically anything, but it is cool that you can augment your stats that way. The Nemesis engine, I think they call it, is back, where, you know, if a random orc kills you, they get promoted, and then the number of times it takes you to defeat them may determine how promoted they get. You can also, for online battles, which this is the big black mark the game's got, it's another game to fall victim to microtransactions.
Right, I've heard so much flack about this. I'm not sure. I didn't look too much into this one as opposed to seeing what was going on with Battlefront 2, which is also getting flagged with that as well.
Yeah.
What are the microtransactions for in this one?
You raise, like, consumable item. You get, like, consumable item. In a lot of ways, I compare it to the recent things you can do in, like, sports games. Like, hockey is a good example for the Ultimate League for EA's NHL series. You buy contracts for your players and things that help heal them fast from an injury or give them temporary stat buffs. You more or less buy those same sort of things. Just think about it from an army standpoint. You know, you can get better. I think you can get, like, short-term use of better characters and stuff like that. And it's just the advanced version of this game to get, like, the season pass and everything was already close to $100. I think you're asking a lot to ask people to then continually spend more on consumables, and it's really starting to show with fan backlash. There has been a lot of backlash about this, and it's going to get worse, I think, as it goes on, and people see more and more stuff that they're having to pay for that they really don't feel like they should, and I don't blame them. I'm not going to do it.
And for this one, it's a loot box style system, right? For this stuff,
I believe some. No. That was the other thing I forgot. Thank you for reminding me. For WWE, there is in part of my career now. I haven't seen where you buy. There probably is microtransactions, but I know for sure that part of what you do to unlock more stuff for your character is done in a loot box style, where you buy these loot boxes with the virtual currency you earn, and they did sort of lower how much virtual currency you get for matches and everything. I don't think there's a component for buying more with real money. There probably will be because it is 2K, but it's not necessary to complete my career. You can unlock enough good stuff and enough good stats and abilities, especially if you got the My Player Kickstart as part of the Deluxe Edition. I mean, 4 matches in, I'm already an XT champion because I got enough stuff to put my stats in a good enough order that skill has carried me far enough to make the game enjoyable. And I don't care if my guy looks like some kind of indie-rific, wrestler, because nobody sees it but me. So it's no big deal to me. But I'll look more into that and report back. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like that's been the biggest issue with a lot of people trying to bring over this loot box system for their own games. The thing that made that work well for Overwatch, which is what kind of first made it big, is it's all cosmetic.
Right.
That is all it ever is and all it will ever be.
Overwatch, yes.
And now we have other games that are pulling the same shit.
But for progressive items.
For progressive items.
Yes, items you can use for regression.
And Battlefront 2 has it even worse where you need it to unlock your star card things, which give you, like, new weapons and stuff.
Right.
Or new... No, they give you augmentations for your character's abilities.
But here's the thing.
And then you can occasionally get, like, the lucky 10 or 20 credits or whatever it is, or junk or whatever it is, which you can then use in, like, you need to get up to like 600 or more to then get a single weapon and craft it for a character, and it seems to be the main way to do it, and it is
well, here's what's going to happen. I mean, I get where you're going with this. I think everybody else does too. Yeah. Here's what I think is going to come up of all this. We're getting really dangerously close to the point where it's kind of like, and I forget the name of the actual old tale, but it's the guy with the wax wings who flies too close to the sun. They're getting there. Like, and again, you said it right on the head that what...
Icarus.
Icarus, I think. Thank you. That's what I was thinking, but then I always think it's Kid Icarus from Nintendo. and that's not the real character. But here's what it is. Like, again, what was it? League of Legends and Overwatch, all of that stuff, you could play that game and prove your skills and everything else, both of those games, and never spend a dime beyond the purchase price. And for League of Legends, never spend a dime. But all of it was cosmetic. All of it was stuff that you didn't need to finish the game. We're going to get so many of these big marquee titles who got away with it before when it made sense. Like, as much as I hate to say it, yes, if you're really trying to build and be a champion online for like a sports game, then yes, needing the credits to buy better players, that's a pretty close model to real life. And you get these players who are on YouTube and everything else who, like Bacon Country, who spend very little money because they have all day to grind play, and they have the talent where they get a lot of credits because they do a lot of great things on ice. So that's fine. But we're getting to the point where it's going to be a lot of people where just to play the game, you spend $70 to get the game, another $20. So you're already almost, again, like what we're seeing now. You spend almost $100 to get the game and the season pass, and then, just to even stay competitive at the casual level, it may cost you another $100 to $200. People are just going to not buy those titles. And Battlefront 1, the reboot of Battlefront, did not do as good as they want you to believe it did. And if Battlefront 2 doesn't get its act together, that's going to be the end of the Battlefront series, and that's terrible because that's a series that deserved its reboot.
Its reboot. And that's the saddest thing. Not looking at that, everything else is fantastic with that series.
But,
like its quality in recreating the Star Wars experience is fantastic. But then they go through with this, microtransaction BS, and you're hurting your market and your longevity.
Well, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those people who don't understand. And yes, you could boil it down to, they just want all of our money. Video games are expensive to make. They are. They cost as much, if not more, than major Hollywood movies. But unlike a Hollywood movie where you have international demand, our worst action movies here still usually make their money back overseas. I mean, why do you think we have so many Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movies or Jack Reacher movies? And that's not a joke. I mean, I love to give them more free press. Check out past episodes where the Real Spoilers guys talk about any of the Jack Reachers or Mission Impossible movies. No matter how good they're, like, well, yeah, but here's the budget. No, look, overseas did $200 million. That's why we have this one. It's true. That doesn't really exist as much for gaming. So they needed something to make games more viable, but they still didn't learn for themselves because DLC stopped selling as well because people sort of figured out, wait a minute, you're giving us content that's on disc and we're paying you to finish unlocking the game. So they had to sort of, not that EA's ever learned or ever will learn, but most other companies had to step back off of that. So microtransactions have become the way to go, and it's cell phone gamers' fault because they're impatient, don't want to wait an hour for something to finish building. So, I'll just buy more gems or berries or whatever for this farming. Or
I'll finish building my building in Clash of Clans.
And it carried over. But it's even getting to the point now where there's a lot of people where it's like, I'll just preload my phone. My phone's got enough space. Now I can put 20 or 30 games like that on here. And by the time I'm finished running through all the games I have upkeep in, the first game on the list is back to ready for me to upkeep it. So it's going to get to a point where they're going to be like, well, why did this stop? And it's because, hey, dummies, we'll figure out ways not to pay you. That's how it always is. And that's why I'm so grateful Cuphead did well. I'm so grateful that it sold over 1 million copies because they did it right. They gave you a well-done game, fully complete, enough to be worth the playtime for a reasonable price.
Right, and they're talking about quality DLC in the future that's going to basically be, I believe, like a whole other island of levels.
Right.
Which is
all
a third
they
of
need.
the game's content for, I think for some amount of small price, but
sure.
Not over expensive.
Right. And game companies will learn their lesson, but for now we just got to kind of wade through this. But that's enough rambling about games. So let's talk a little bit about movies and encroach on our friends' territory a little bit. Last night, we went and saw, what's it actually called?
Professor Marsden and the Wonder Women.
Right. And if for those who don't know, Wonder Woman was actually created by a psychologist who more or less used her as a way to introduce his own psychological theories, built a lot around, as he would put it in the movie, submitting to a loving authority, which of course got kind of mixed into heavy sexual overtones. Himself and his wife ended up both falling in love with a student teacher, I guess is the best way, or
teacher assistant,
right? In their class, because he was teaching one of the first actual psychology classes at
Radcliffe, because of course it was the women's college version of Harvard, because colleges were still
right. In fact,
separated by gender.
When they do the title bar as to where that scene is taking place, that it was Harvard Radcliffe College.
Yes,
and all in all, the story's great. Like I've said on a couple of different places, the story itself is a great story, because I do think the movie itself isn't as great as Cherie thinks it is, but that's because I think, and we'll get to it here after we're done explaining it, how they could have made it a little bit better. And so the story opens with them.
The story opens with a scene where Professor Marsden is having to begin, because they do a lot of flash forward and flashbacking.
Right. This movie is not linear.
No, definitely not. But he is having to defend and justify Wonder Woman, because the
basically to an
one
expert
of the Big Brother,
right? But she's basically an expert on child mental health and like what's appropriate for children. This seems like
childhood decency committee,
right?
Or
like
something.
To me, I think it I don't know. Let me look this up real fast. I was going to do this and I forgot. When the Comic Code of or Comic Authority of America started to self-police, but this seems to be predating the regulation body that had to approve comics.
Well, the comic came out in, I believe, according to the movie, 1941.
Okay, and the Comic Code Authority was formed in 1954.
Right.
So that's why. So yes, before that, there was a lot of comic books that were way more graphic and risque, and some of them were being marketed to children. There was a lot of horror themed ones. Well, by their standards of those days, like a lot of the Universal monsters, like Wolfman and Dracula, had comics that were violent and gory because the thought was, well, they're just drawings.
When did TMNT start again? Was it long after that? Because I know they originally were like a lot different from when they started.
No, you got to realize not every comic submits to the Comic Code Authority, and at the time, Turtles started as a joke on a lot of the crazes of the 80s, and was more geared for teens and young adult. Actually, it was more geared for adults, not at a porno level, but they didn't really care. And then it got, then when they realized there was money in it, they toned it down and made it more kid friendly after the first couple of runs. So,
yeah.
Well, I'm going to guess that, especially with Turtles, that it probably experienced some of the same phenomenon that Sailor Moon actually experienced in Japan. It was originally supposed to be marketed. It was originally written for a teen audience.
Yes.
And teen to young adult audience. And because the animation company saw the potential for toy marketings, they tried to market it to a younger audience than the creator of Sailor Moon originally intended.
Yeah.
So, I would imagine some of the same things happened with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because, that you can make all kinds of cool toys out of that, and they did.
For sure.
So, but to get back to the movie at hand, it begins on Professor Marsden having to defend his decisions about Wonder Woman, and then it flashes back to his time teaching at Radcliffe with his wife there working with him.
Research, basically she was there working research, and this is where we start getting into what I call doing, like, they're setting up for too many plots.
I think that the aim was to give the characters more depth and to give you a greater understanding.
but they do that in such a way where in a normal, well, in any other movie, you would.
Are you normal?
But you would think of this as, oh, so this is what we're going down, because there's, all the fight that Elizabeth has about being recognized. Like she wants to be recognized. Like she's about to graduate as a PhD, but they won't issue it, even though it's taught by the same course taught by the same professors. They won't issue it from Harvard,
right?
Because she's a woman.
Elizabeth is Marston's wife, and she is a very strong, very determined. As he puts it, a very, I know you go for ratings, but with this movie, she's a bitch on wheels.
Right.
Sorry, we can't entirely censor this one.
Yes.
And she desires to have a degree with the same level of weight.
Yes.
As a man's degree.
Right, because Radcliffe wasn't looked on as a.
So she applies to receive her doctorate from Harvard, and they deny her. And she is prepared to try again because she doesn't want another degree from Radcliffe. She already has her master's from Radcliffe. She wants her PhD to be from Harvard.
Right.
Because that is what matters.
Right, and again, we're already spending as much time talking about it as they did on it in the movie for this to mean almost nothing. When I'll give them credit before I go on, because it's going to sound like a more negative review than it is. They pay off a lot of this build-up, but they took so long getting this build-up in place. The payoffs are just mowed down at almost a machine gun rate. Like
in your opinion,
later on, okay. In my opinion, here's the payoff for this. They fast forwarding a little bit. They've been found out that they have a domestic partner who's a woman. Not only that, they've lost their job at the school, so they're having the baby, and they finally try to figure out, okay, we've got to do something to make money. So Elizabeth is deciding to become a secretary, and the payoff is she finally breaks down and just accepts that it's from Radcliffe, because they're reading literally about a minute of dialogue where the man
she
hiring
corrects
her.
him.
But still,
she corrects him. She never accepts it.
She's still okay. You can't. Her official is from Radcliffe because it's on her resume. She even
her master's
and her doctorate. You misheard the line because she said, and you have because he asked if she was too qualified for the job, because she said, I see here you have your master's and your PhD from, or your master's from Radcliffe and your PhD from or your master's PhD from Radcliffe. She goes Harvard. Because if she hadn't had it issued, it wouldn't have even been on her resume.
And I'm pretty sure it wasn't.
Then why would the guy reading off her resume mention her PhD? He mentions it because that was the one moment where I was like, that was a frustrating moment, because like that was it.
Actually, I don't remember him mentioning it, but either way, no. It builds a lot of the bitterness and hesitation that Elizabeth experiences throughout the film, having already been screwed, so to speak, by man's world.
Right. And that's not the only one, and I know this one, I got that one out of the way because I knew it was going to be taking point for you, but there's other little things like that. Like the whole, like they frame discovering their relationship, because this is the same gentleman who is very influential and credited as the inventor of the lie detector.
Yes.
So they frame their discovering the depths of who actually, because of course it's done in the way where the assumption on Elizabeth's part is that, the husband is attracted to Olive, and she's
Olive being the student.
Yes, and Olive is attracted to him. She doesn't really see, even though they basically beat the audience over the head with it, with all the little nods they try to do in subtlety, that Olive is developing feelings for Elizabeth, because like they always try to do the oop, do we catch each other? I'm going to look away right as you're looking. They do that a lot, and there
are a great deal of stolen glances.
They try to balance it. Now I'll give them credit, and this is actually a credit. They try to balance it as much with the husband in all the class shots when he's lecturing and Olive's a student in class, which is another subplot is that she's engaged, and the boyfriend eventually figures out what's up, because there's this little half-second throwaway scene where a friend of hers in class notices sort of a lingering look between the three of them, and I'm guessing they threw that in as the bone if anybody ever nitpicked about, well, how did the boyfriend?
Because everyone knew.
Right. So they do try to balance it, but yes, the build up to the character is that she's got to come to grips. Now you also have to realize during the time all this is taking place, being homosexual wasn't just frowned upon; it was illegal in most places and looked at as an actual mental disorder.
Yes, it was looked at as a mental illness. It was actually listed in the diagnostics diagnostics and statistics manual,
something like that.
But it was listed in the DSM as a mental health disorder. So homosexuality was a mental health disorder. We spent a
lot of time on this, so I want to kind of get us through the muddy waters at the beginning. So we're pretty much at the point now where because we're actually backtrack a little bit, they've figured out, because the big joke is at first the wife notices like pretty much straight away in the film that he finds this girl attractive, and at first she's all like, oh, you guys could sleep together because I don't get sexually jealous.
All right, it's the I am your wife, not your jailer,
as she says. And then of course when they decide to have her, or when she signs up, when Olive signs up to be their student assistant, the very first thing she says to her is, if you fuck my husband, I'll kill you. Again, I'm quoting the movie.
No, she says, would you not fuck my husband?
Or yeah, something like that.
She does not threaten to kill her.
I could have sworn she said something, because
can you please not fuck my husband?
No, because I think she said that after saying, if you fuck my husband, I'll kill you. And then because Olive is floored to the point where basically from that moment on she stays virtually crying, and then she goes, I'm sorry, but would you please not fuck my husband, is where she kind of leads it into. And that's where you start get the first inkling that she feels threatened by her, but also not, like, I've seen threatening women who feel threatened. I've lived with you.
He's seeing the look I'm giving him now.
That's accurate. My statement is accurate. But anyway, whoever played Elizabeth, and I was going to look it up, but for as much as they don't really build her as well as they were trying to, like, they were trying to build her up as someone who's headstrong and has to learn not to be, to make all this work, which really didn't seem to fit, considering that in that kind of dynamic that would make her a submissive, when it was very clear that based on her personality and everything, that Olive was a more naturally submissive person.
No, I believe that the tenet for Elizabeth was that she needed to learn, as was stated later in the film, that one cannot be dominant all the time.
Right, and I think they do that. Not, okay, I don't want to say because that was how she was. I think they built that wrong, so that when we got to that at the end, where they have that breakthrough moment with her, it really it worked better than it probably should have, but was really forced feeling.
I didn't feel like it was forced. I felt like it was appropriate.
Maybe. And who played her in the film? Damn it. In film. Okay. Here we go. Sorry. She was played by Rebecca Hall.
Well, I'm not familiar with Rebecca Hall.
I'm not either.
That's
what I was saying. Is she really, for what they gave her to work with, which again, and out. If you hear me talk about this, like I told anybody else, yes, the story is a really good story that should have been told. But to do all of this frame building of their relationship and what this was supposed to mean in terms of what this man and subsequently these two women are most known for in their life, which is the creation of the Wonder Woman comic and the eventual need to defend it, that becomes such a back burner thing by the end of it. They have to rush through. And I get it. It is more about their lives than that. But,
it is.
But that's such the selling point of why we should care about these three people's relationship, that it just made that whole second half, like the whole first half, dragged on, however you say that properly, that when we got to the second half, everything, like I said, just kind of got mowed down so quickly. And the movie's what, an hour 40, I think you said it was?
It is an hour and 40-something minutes.
I'm like, I don't usually say this, but I'd have been perfectly happy. There's two, like, the ideal world, this would have been an excellent miniseries. You could add three very distinct phases, with the major thing that's going to dominate the next phase being the kickoff for the first two, that could have told all the stories they were trying to tell And for this many number of stories, a relatively short movie, everything could have developed more properly, and a lot of these nitpicks could have been gone. And that's how I would have done it. But so where are we at now in this? So we're at the point now where they're together.
Well, you've kind of skipped around a lot. You have not gone, and you have done as bad a job as you might say the film did with being linear.
But that's the problem, is it's the only way to properly explain it because of how they go back and forth so bad in the film. You have to understand it. You have to think ahead and then back so that all this stuff falls into place. But so let's pick it up from the most consistent part we talked about, which is...
No, you glossed over the part with when they came together, when they finally came together. Part of it was a result of some questions that took place with the lie detector.
That's what I was getting to, is the lie detector thing. That again, like I said before, they use that as the framing device of their relationship coming together. And it
happens in a couple of different instances. First, there is a scene where Bill, Professor Marston, is given the lie detector, and that ends up upsetting Elizabeth because it reveals that he does not only find Olive attractive and want to have sex with her, he is in love with her.
Right.
And Elizabeth struggles to come to grips with that. And Olive, and she does try to go catch Olive, and when she goes to try to catch Olive to try to ask Olive if she is in love with her husband, Olive confesses that she is in love with her.
Right. And
she kisses her, but then
they have a gay
Elizabeth throws her out.
As I say, let's be honest, Elizabeth has a gay panic moment.
She panics and she throws her out.
Because that's exactly what it was. She pushed her off. It wasn't, which I give them credit for. That is a scene that was very well done, because that is something that you and I, obviously you for sure, because you are, but I know a lot of gay guys and women, actually more women than men, actually. You know a lot, obviously being a part of the community at a far deeper level than I am. No matter how much you may think you are something, if you're confronted with it in that manner, it is human nature to draw back. It is our nature, or actually, no, not human. It is our societal nature to draw back.
Yes, we have been socially conditioned to reject the unknown, the uncertain, the contradictory to what complies with social norms.
Right, which is a whole big subplot of this whole movie too. And really read up on this concept of disc theory. It's interesting to a fault, and by a fault I mean it's horribly flawed and not accurate. But
it is
there's
incredibly
good ideas
interesting.
There. It's interesting, and there's good ideas there, but there is a reason why this isn't really taught much anymore.
Yes, it did not make it into the, historical annals of psychology.
Right. But, and that was a big thing I was going to talk about, because the biggest reason why all of a sudden the lie detector became viable is Elizabeth figures out, in the movie it's Elizabeth figures out that, or was it all of that? One of them figures out that blood pressure change.
Elizabeth figures out the blood pressure change in an exchange she and Olive have.
Right, and then Olive figures out when they couldn't replicate it that the lie's got to mean something. If I just look at you and say, what color's the sky, and you say green...
Right, I'm not invested.
You're not invested in the lie, so nothing changes physiologically. But that's what led to them talking about...
That's what led to Elizabeth actually asking Bill the questions about who he was in love with and all of that.
And then, of course, then this is where it gets a little, who wrote the Notebook? Nicholas Sparks?
I don't know.
This is where it gets a little Nicholas Sparksy, because, of course, everything's great, and after all of the exchange about that, they finally, try to explore how they feel.
No, after the exchange, they have a period where they try to distance themselves from Olive, and then they realize that they're miserable, so they ask her to come back, and she comes back, and then there's eventually a whole conversation about there are a couple of scenes where they're out with her fiance, the four of them on a double date.
Right, they try to be friends.
And then one of them...
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Because I think when they get to the point of double dating, is this before or after they
They do finally. She comes back to be their TA, but they don't
and she
get
shoots
together.
them down because of course Elizabeth tries to approach the reconciling them all together, like, okay, well, we don't have to talk about sex, but we can talk about how we feel about each other. And Olive, of course, because she got shunned, is very like, no, I'm engaged. No, this is how it's going to be. That's an important thing not to leave out, is that at first the married couple, Bill and Elizabeth, talk about how they feel, and this is where they have realized there could be something there with both of them. But at this point, Olive is now, and this happens a lot, well, not a lot, but this is a pretty recurring motif in the movie. One of them always seems to back away, especially of the two women.
Which is a very common thing
It is.
in triad relationships, that it can be very
It happened
difficult.
a lot with us in May.
Yeah, it can be very difficult to get all three people on the same page on a regular basis.
Right. And that I wanted to make sure that part didn't get left out, because that really implores what happens with the boyfriend on the last time they hang out. Would you have more insight into than I did, because I had to unfortunately step away at that time?
Yeah, well, they go on a couple of different double dates, and it looks like things are kind of settled in and normal, or as normal-ish as they are going to get. And then there is an evening, or an early evening, and it appears like the sun's getting ready to go down and everything, where they're out at a lake, and Olive makes a statement about playing a game that they play in her sorority, which they had done an observation earlier on her sorority that involved a pledge being punished through spanking, and that was a whole thing too. But to go back to the lake, Olive proposes this game. It's a guessing game about what is it you long for. And so Olive goes first, and she tells Elizabeth what she thinks Elizabeth longs for. And she thinks Elizabeth longs for an unconventional life, is how she describes it. And then, there's a brief exchange there, and then Elizabeth tries to get her fiance, and I cannot remember his name, but her fiance, to guess what Olive would wish
Johnny
for.
Everyman, because that's basically what he is. He is the embodiment of the typical male mindset, even
of the time,
a college male mindset. So he's a little bit better off than the more,
yes,
but he's still a very conservative guy.
And of course he gets upset, and he goes off on the Marstons and tells Olive that he doesn't understand what she sees in them. He has tried, and it's and it begins with the question of what are your intentions toward Olive, and Bill, the husband, Professor Marsden, starts to answer, and he goes, "No, I know what your intentions are," and he asks what Elizabeth's intentions are. And so that argument progresses, and then he gets up and leaves, and Olive leaves with him, and then she gets up in the middle of the night, and or late at night, and she goes to the Marsden's office in the university, and they ask her what she's doing there, and she's like, "I don't know." So then they put her in the lie detector and begin asking the loaded questions about how do you feel and what do you want and all of that. And then she's shot down, or there's something that happens where Olive takes off.
Elizabeth said, I can't remember exactly what was said either, because now bear in mind, everything we're explaining and all of the jumping, even without, if you take out the few parts where I had to jump forward, all the stuff that happens in the time frame of Olive's time as their TA is 40 minutes of the movie. I know this because movie started at 7:50. I got up to come to the bathroom and come back. It was right across from our theater. I looked at my watch real fast because it's an Apple Watch. Make sure I didn't have any messages before I went back in. And it was, the movie starts about 10 minutes after that. So it started at 8, and it was 8:40 when I came back in. So that's what I mean by they spent so much time in the beginning building all of this.
But there's something to be said that they were building the depth into the characters.
They were, but that came at the expense of, again, when we got to the point where...
It came at the expense, from what I can gather from your estimation, at pacing.
Yes. Pacing, that's a good... Pacing and resolution speed which are basically linked, was what the price was of this. And again, that's where, because this movie's not big enough to be a 2-part movie, like,
No.
but where for the same amount of budget, and probably could have gotten the same stars if this would have been on a real high class, if this would have been on like HBO, and they did it as like a 4-night, like when they did that John Adams movie set where they built it up and they really tell the story, it would have been great. And we'll be here all night if we don't really speed this up, because so we're gonna have to kind of do what they did, because we're already 40 something minutes in.
Well, they have, of course, Elizabeth comes and catches up with her, and then there's, they all three finally truly get together on that physical level. They have sex, and then they're inseparable, and everyone knows what's going on. And then her fiance breaks up with her, and then they get fired. The Marstons get fired.
And then we have big pull away number 2, where they're just like, you need to wear Elizabeth. And again, it's Elizabeth up until the last time. Let's just save that, because it's Elizabeth that pulls away until the last time.
Well, Elizabeth starts to pull away, and then Olive reveals that she's pregnant.
Right, and then they're trying to make things work. There's still definitely some dissension between Olive and Elizabeth, and it's mostly because Elizabeth doesn't handle stress well. That's one thing they don't say it, but you can really tell when she's not.
She's a little bit neurotic.
Not only, I was going to say she's a little bit spoiled, because when they're, the professor and his wife, and they've got the money where she can more or less bitch about where her degree comes from that she's never really using, she doesn't care. But when money's a thing, and they're living in a, they're spending, their savings are almost gone, and that's when she turns on William, because when he figures out how to make the lie detector work, there's another throwaway line from Olive. Here's another mowed down payoff, where all that work about the lie detector, oh my God, it's going to be so great for them, and it helped them get their life together as a couple or as a trouple. Oh, he just published the results, which of course led to somebody else patenting the design, and he doesn't see any money from it. And it was all in a throwaway line about how some company's making a fortune off of the lie detector machines. Maybe they could sell them because they worked on them, and they, and Elizabeth is all upset about that. Yeah, somebody should have patented it, which obviously she didn't seem to care about. And his answer was a valid one. Well, science is for everybody. I have the right to publish it. Mm-hmm. So that's a big sort of character development in her that does kind of ease away in time. But there in the beginning, she definitely was a lot more spoiled, which when you're reading a little bit I've read about the woman, she seemed to have come from a slightly more higher end background, which would make sense considering she's been through so many prestigious schools even for the time.
Yes, and eventually they finally, Olive has the first baby, and they decide that they're going to move away, start over, and they're going to create, they're going to construct a story, and they have to stick to it.
And it's a fairly simple story for the time, which is Olive is more or less a friend of theirs whose husband died.
Who's widowed, yes.
And
they took her in.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense for the time, and it works. And, of course, that's where we get into them learning about, the husband's trying to write books, and he's just not a great writer, per se. And, actually, they imply that he's a good writer. He's just not writing about stuff people care about. He's
right, so his books aren't selling.
Right, on disc theory and a few other things. So, and then, of course, he stumbles into a lingerie shop, and, of course, the perfect stereotypical, French pervert, I was laughing about this in the movie.
Yes.
Is teaching him about ropes. And
the G-string king.
And this is another big point, but I don't want to take another 40 minutes to explain it. I'm going to take over the wheel here a little bit, if you don't mind. Basically, he gets all enamored in this. His excuse is that, and it does fit his main components of disc theory, so he's trying to figure out a way to use that to teach the theory in a way people may listen to. And of course he brings Olive and Elizabeth to a rope demonstration, and Elizabeth doesn't get it, is sort of, agitated by it. Now we have a disagreement about who he refers to as when she storms out as, of course, you're the submissive. I thought he said it to Olive, you thought he said it to the husband. Both work on different levels.
I believe that I believe that Professor Marston was submissive to Elizabeth.
And that's got into a really great discussion we had earlier today about the reason why we looked at it differently is it depended on what dynamic you looked at. because with Elizabeth, I always felt they when it was just the two of them, they had grown to a more switch dynamic. That while she was naturally dominant, they had sort of, and she kind of alludes to this when she talks about the fact that she finally broke down and married him because he respected her and everything else. So I think that's where that sort of came from. But with Olive, Bill was the dominant and Elizabeth wasn't sure at first. And then while they're out talking, Olive puts on a burlesque outfit, and of course she always, a subtle nod to the Wonder Woman inspiration is throughout the whole movie, every scene she's in, she's wearing silver bracelets.
Yes.
And so they put her in the thigh-high boots and the burlesque outfit, and she already puts on a tiara, and she already has the bracelets on, and the G-string king hands her the rope, and of course she steps outside, and they do it in this great shot they come back, the Marstons come back in, and she's standing with this light behind her, so of course she looks like the perfect outline of Wonder Woman.
Yes. And
this is where, of course, they have Bill has the inspiration, and Elizabeth takes the rope and asks her, basically, is this what you want? And this also calls back to the spanking scene where it's very clear it's having an erotic effect on both of them, of Elizabeth watching and Olive doing it. So there's already the groundwork laid for this. So then she starts tying her up, and they both seem to enjoy it. That gets them over that hurdle, and everything's great again until one day everybody sort of calls off work to play around, and a neighbor just walks into their house like, why the would you be walking into my house?
Yeah, I agree with that
them,
one.
And of course that starts them down the road of everybody knows, so there's another pull away.
Well, yeah, because one of the kids gets into a fight
with the neighbors who were their friends, and it's all this whole mess about indecent lifestyles and stuff. And this is also where, defending the comic book, which, by the way, I want to say one thing about the whole comic book process. They didn't use DC by name. I don't know if that was maybe the National Comic, whatever they called it, was DC's original name. I don't remember my DC history well enough to know. But I didn't recognize the guy at first until I went back and looked at IMDb. That was Oliver Platt playing the publisher. And I love that dude because he's that good at acting that whatever he's doing, he kind of disappears into. And I mean, going back and replaying, like, oh yeah, that is definitely him. He was probably one of the really great supporting roles in this movie. Cause
yes,
he's on the one hand defending Marston while on the other trying to run his business. So there's a cutaway scene where he's telling him you need to cut down the kink stuff, and then of course they show Marston dropping off a draft, and one of the random animators cartoonist is like, hey Doc, there's almost double the kinky stuff in here the boss didn't want. He's like, yeah, I actually tripled it, and that's a paraphrase line. So anyway, during the sort of crescendo of defending Wonder Woman, and you see it a little bit earlier, Bill starts having coughing fits, and one of them is bad enough that when he decides to get up and leave, he collapses in the stairs.
Yes.
And by this point, Olive has been separated. Her and her children by him have moved out, so this is pretty bad. And he's in the hospital for months. She comes and visits, but you can tell there's still clearly a dissolution of the relationship, but nobody's happy. And eventually, he's cleared to go home, but he knows he's dying.
Yes.
He died of skin cancer, although I think since they were smokers in the movie and coughing and everything, I think it was, in the movie, they're implying lung cancer.
They didn't specify, they just said cancer.
Right. So he finally gets to go home and live out his last few years or days or whatever, and he finally basically says fuck it and wants them together. And I love how he gets to that point. He's like, I need to say something, and then he looks at Liz and goes, but I need my wife not to talk for 3 minutes.
Yes, but I need you to promise me something first.
Right.
You won't talk for 3 minutes.
And the whole thing is literally him saying, look, you two love each other. You're miserable without each other. I'm dying, so you two are going to need each other. And this is where we had that scene we talked about earlier where Elizabeth, makes Elizabeth...
He encourages her.
Yeah, that would be a better way, to get down on her knees and literally beg. And then, of course, because it has a happy ending, so it's not like they're rewriting history. But, of course, they got to get... Because the one thing I'll give this movie is they had a lot of smart humor moments in there. And they had one really kind of nice one where she's like, okay, I want a new stove. And they're like, what? She's like, your guys' stove is ancient. The back burners don't work. Because she more or less had filled out the domestic role for them.
Yes. She was the stay-at-home mother.
And she's like, and also you guys are going to be in charge of the kids at least one weekend so that I can have some time for myself.
Right.
And
She wanted them to she wanted someone to take the kids out once on the weekends so that she could have time to herself.
Right. She more or less accepts that she's going to be back with them. And then, of course, she makes a joke about changing Wonder Woman's outfit, and he's like, no, that's where I draw the line. And then they do reveal that, they got back together and stayed together. I think the panel takes place in, 1950. No, 40.
Well, they also do a scene where he does a press conference and talks about what Wonder Woman means to him.
Right.
And after that, you get some of those wrap-up information where it talks about how this, how long he lived, when he died.
Right, he died in 1947.
How
and this was
the fact that Olive, and Elizabeth lived together for the rest of Olive's life, and Olive died before Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And then that their oldest son, I believe, has a Wonder Woman museum that he owns, and that he finally passed away
this year.
In January of this year.
So, a really, like I said, a great story overall. And very, obviously, there's, as evidenced by the fact we both watched this movie and had drastically different takeaways from their interactions. And, when you talk about the polyamory side of it, I've been in those kind of relationships more than you, but you've been smarter about how to recognize the interplays between people than most people who are at your level with experience of it, to be honest. And we still saw it very differently. And I think that's, again, because they had to sort of shortcut what payoffs were going to matter later. It muddled up the message they were trying to get.
Possibly. But I think that there was a lot to be said for their interpersonal interactions, and that it added a lot to the film. And it also added a lot to the story as a whole.
It added a lot to why Wonder Woman was the way she was, because she was an amalgamation of those two women.
Yes, and there is a line in the movie that Marsden uses where he basically describes how different they both are, and that together they make the perfect woman.
Yeah, that's during the
early part of the film.
Right.
So.
And it's retouched on when he's dying.
But yeah, the two of them make up Wonder Woman.
All right, well, I think we've successfully bored Fireheart out of the film, so all in all, I think both of us could definitely say go see it.
I would definitely say go see it.
Even if you wait for VOD or if you buy it.
I intend to own it.
See it. So that was that movie, and hopefully the real spoilers guys don't give us any gruff for basically wholesale stealing their gimmick. But
we did not wholesale steal their gimmick. We mixed it up, and we don't usually do this much on movies, so yeah.
That's true. We would more likely do this much on video games. But anyway.
And they usually have more than two people who've seen it.
Right. No, not really, because usually one of them doesn't see a movie.
I know.
That's where the term blind man synopsis came from them. But anyway, enough talking about better podcasts. So, you guys had a convention not that long ago, didn't you?
We did, last Saturday.
So, and what one was it?
Anime Getaway.
Now, what's its gimmick? It's like just a one-day...
It is, for at least here in the St. Louis area, it is a one-day, what we commonly, colloquially refer to as a mini convention. Mm-hmm. But it is a top-rate convention.
Yeah, it's kind of
it
like
has
the
very
end of the
good
season.
Panels. It typically has excellent guest stars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were we saying, Fireheart?
I was saying that it's Oh God, I lost what I said.
Oh Lord.
The season wrap up, basically.
Yeah.
Around here,
basically, it's like the last big one for the.
It's
year.
the last hurrah for con season. I do know that.
And,
yes, because
it was my first convention actually.
And from a guy who cares about merch and vending, because that's what I do. Our friends who do vend out there all say it's
it's good money.
It's a good money, and that's how you know how good a con is, because you can have everything. You can have a great theory for a con, but if your vendor room doesn't make enough money where anybody wants to come back, it's a crap con.
Yeah.
So,
And overall, it's got a good
and all of our vendor friends, which, by the way, hey, Mark out at Toys of Our Youth, and who just sold me $400 worth of stuff that I think I miscalculated on and paid him a little closer to retail than I was intending.
Rip.
Yeah, well.
But, yeah.
A lot of this is booth attractor stuff anyway, so it's not like
it's definitely a fun con for as small it is.
It is.
It's like I said, it definitely has pulled some great names as guests that
yeah,
but you would expect because.
But we heard some news about this.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
I want to mention for those who are
Stop breaking my mics.
anime and video game and voice fans. I mean, the last 3 years that I've been able to participate in it, we've had J. Michael Tatum, who is Sebastian from Black Butler and a whole host of other things. We've had the voice actor for Edward Elric. I cannot...
Yeah, Vigman.
Yeah, I can't remember his name. I never remember his name. Last year, I know one of the voice actors was the actor who does CL from Black Butler.
Nice.
And we also had... This year was...
Josh Grell was one of them.
Josh Grell was one of them, and also was Bryce, and I'm blanking on his last name, but he did the voice of several good characters, including Kirito from Sword Art Online, Hanabusa Ido from Vampire Knight, and he did a bunch of video game voices too.
All right, well, we could go on and on, jerking these guys off, but the idea here is that was one of the last in the area for anime cons, isn't it?
It is...
For straight-up anime cons,
Straight-up anime cons, it is one of two that remains at this point.
And we unfortunately got some news that if it's true is going to kind of suck, and that is...
Yes, we have some conflicting rumors going around, and one of them is that it may or it may not return next year.
And I will say that rumor is from a very credible source who has an interest in that being... whose interest would be better if that was false. So for him to say that that's what's going on,
it's a very high possibility. I don't think that that's just hearsay, but at the same time, we have the other side of that rumor that was mentioned a lot at the end of the convention, and then the couple of days following that they were going to attempt to expand to a 3-day con next year. So we have some both very in extreme ends of the spectrum of either it's going to be bigger next year or it's not coming back at all. And I do unfortunately have to lean toward the not coming back because of the credibility of the source. And
that's sad with the number of other cons that have wrapped up. So
it is, but it's coming from a place... I understand where it's coming from if it's true. The understanding is that because of the increase in Anime St. Louis and them adding a Comic-Con in October...
right.
And then also you have Archon in October that the folks behind Anime Getaway felt like they couldn't compete.
Yeah, I've got the page pulled up here. Anime St. Louis is making a Gateway Comic-Con in October 27th and 28th of next year at the Gateway Center in Collinsville.
Right,
and that's the same venue as
that
Getaway,
is the same venue as Getaway, and I believe that's the same venue as Archon. And Archon is typically the end of September, beginning of October. It's usually right before Getaway.
Right, so Getaway is, in the same place.
And even
within
though
weeks of each
Archon
other.
is sci-fi focused, you still run in a lot of run over in the communities there.
Right, to the point, like a general con is somewhere I would set up shop at because, obviously some of my really old toys would stay behind, but I could put out all my Marvel figures, my early DC stuff. All that stuff would work well. And that's part of the reason why I've avoided anime conventions is I really don't sell a lot that would fall just under there. And I've had vendors, including Mark, telling me, oh, no, you should do it anyway because people would love the video games and stuff. I'm like, I've been in that room. People go for, DVDs and they go for figures. And that's really
that is a bit out of your market.
And I don't have the market strength for that.
Depending on how well... I think Gateway Comic-Con is being...
Now, Fireheart, if we stole the Sailor Moon stuff here...
No!
Have fun with that
but all these figures that I paid way too much for
that
I would never be able to recoup my losses on because I love you that much.
Anyway, I think...
Three of them are staring at me right now, the friggin' star. There's like $700 in figures right there.
Okay. 1, it wasn't just you. 2, a lot of it was done in trades. 3,
Knife.
no.
Not the Starlight figures.
4,
All 3 Starlight figures were cash money.
I was gonna say,
I realize that.
and 3,
But-
knife.
Yeah.
Yes.
No,
No, that was number 4 after no.
What I was wanting to say was, I think Gateway Comic Con's doing like a fundraising campaign to help get it off the ground. I mean, this one might be. I feel like as a Comic Con, this one might work better for a potential venue for you because of our quality of merchandise.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've been looking at like what's that one coming up in St. Charles?
There's not one coming up in St. Charles.
What's the one that was in St. Charles that you guys go to? That you get a hotel room for?
Oh, Anime St. Louis.
Even that one is big enough that
Yes,
one might be worth
that
it.
one is
Yeah,
big enough
that's
that
definitely the
brings
biggest.
in. That brings in a lot of people, and it brings in a lot of people from a lot of different areas.
Right. So
right, because of their hotel venue, they definitely get a lot of travelers.
That is the one Mark is like, I'm surprised you're not out here. And I may, well, I'm too late to do it for this next coming year. Although I may still reach out to them and say, hey, if you get a cancellation, let me know.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they've got a waiting list anyway. But the next
Is there a
following
waiting
year,
list I can get on?
right, the next following year, I may really start aiming my picking towards getting a few more middle of the road things, which I've already been sort of doing, and set up shop out there. But let's hope that it works out for you guys, because I actually, I get the house minus the animals. I get the house to myself when you guys are gone, and the animals are pretty easily arrested. Like, here's a video game, go.
Fighting.
I don't
5
like
minutes
the
later.
implication of that, sir.
If the house is quiet.
When do I get the house quiet? When are you leaving?
I feel like she's not the one that usually makes the house loud. It's the kids.
Right. But you see, here's the thing. The kids are definitely terrified when they're home alone with me.
True.
They're not when they're home alone with me.
Right. The warden is here without the warden's warden, so it's like, oh no. he might actually kill us today.
And when it's
Why
just
is
mom,
there- why are
hey,
there
mom, can I get some extra attention from you? Mom,
Why are-
I want to talk to you. Mom!
Guys, why are there 3 holes in the backyard?
No reason.
Oh. Okay. But anyway, back on topic. Hopefully, Anime Getaway can maintain its status without getting too much competition from everything else,
Bullshit.
especially with Gateway, because that is, like I said, it's like 2 weeks apart from its usual date
Right.
at the same venue. So,
But let's keep the anime thread going with one of our last couple topics time. We need to get out of here, and I got a big wrestling thing I want to talk about. But before that, it's a new season for RWBY, isn't it?
Right. It premiered Saturday for the first members. It hits, I think, tomorrow. No,
All right.
Tuesday. No, it hits Tuesday for unsubscribed.
Let's be fair, because they're still
members.
not quite a huge deal yet. I mean, they're pretty popular, but let's be fair to them and give us kind of a spoiler-free overview of what you thought about the first episode.
Or minimal spoilers.
Right.
Without going into any details of what events that happened, I will say that for the first time in the show's history, this is a premiere episode that didn't contain a fight, which is actually kind of interesting.
That is interesting.
That is good, because they really got to decide, are they going to start telling like in-depth stories, or because I think they went dipping back into the fact that these are the same people who did Red versus Blue. I think their original mentality, and I think you and I talked about this in the past with these, is they just really liked the action of anime, and they were really trying to put that on a pedestal, and you can't go all action all the time, because you lose the depth and effectiveness of a story.
Right. Some of the first volumes had some of that issue as they were still setting things up.
Right.
And figuring out the story. They had a lot of good groundwork based on their characters and their personalities and such. And they eventually started to shift more to a story, as opposed what I've always described this as is the reasons to like the show change as it goes on. I've described this to a couple people, friends of mine, is that at the start of it, its biggest draw is the cool action scenes that Monty was a fantastic assistant on, being the primary choreographer.
Right.
And his just incredible talent and knowledge of fight scenes and flow and everything else. With him gone, it has taken a dip, I will not lie. But because of that, the writing and the story has become more of a focus and has become like the main focus of the show. So at the start of the show, it's fantastic fight scenes and interesting characters, but basic story. But later on, it's okay action, better story. and kind of like shifts as it goes on.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
So it's like, it some people I understand will fall out of the show based on their interest of what they originally liked it for. If they don't care.
Every show does that. I mean, every
Right.
show morphs its audience because you have the diehards who will watch it all, but then you have the casuals who, if whatever's on screen isn't exactly pressing their buttons, they move on. Wrestling runs into that all the time. So obviously, they've gone in a seemingly new direction. Will really continue the direction they went into that I observed from the last season.
Right, the last season started it with the new engine style. The new volume is even better looking than it was.
Well, of course,
volume 4. And that, like every time,
they get better.
This is very repetitive with every volume. But yeah, once again, it is a vast improvement as they've gotten even more time to learn the new engine. We haven't, like I said, we didn't get a fight except. There was the Yang short, which was released the same time, and that is released everyone.
But that's not a part of the episode.
It's not, but it is still made by the same people and same
part
animation.
of the canon.
It is,
and that one did have a fight. It was a flashback showing Yang before she even left for Beacon. At first, it shows her doing a no weapon sparring with RWBY because she wants RWBY to learn some hand to hand, which I've discussed this with friends before. I think she could really learn what use if she got good with hand to hand and mix that with her speed semblance. She could really be a deadly opponent.
Yes,
probably
throwing down an opponent like a speed bag.
Right.
But later, Grimm jumps into the fray, and Yang has to take care of that. And that was where it feels like when I watch that fight scene, they're trying to get the flow back that the old episodes had. There's a lot of Yang using her guns to propel around and dodge attacks, slip under like between its legs, weave back and forth and such. But they're not doing they need to get a little bit better at matching the camera motions with it.
Because a lot of that's going to be a limitation of the engine.
Possibly, yeah. A lot of that is just the camera's kind of just still focused on the shot as she zips around it, which isn't too bad, but that was one of the things that helped drive the impact in the original scenes was the camera work.
All right. Well, that's good to know. And
so, like, basically at this point, I'm waiting to see the next fight actually hitting the volume.
Yeah, that's going to be the telling moment is the first fight. I don't want to say in canon because you're right, that short is in canon, but in the show, because that's also where they're going to put the most attention to detail because that's where their biggest payoff is. So that's good to know, and we'll come back to that later. So final thing I want to talk about tonight, and we're running already about 10, 15 minutes over, so I'm going to make it brief, is, the big thing going on in WWE right now. Well, there's two things. One, I see Sami Zayn turn heel. I think it opens up a huge possibility to play out on TV some of the stuff I'm going to talk about, because the biggest reason he did it was, Kevin Owens used him to get to the main event, and he still tried to do everything the right way and still got overlooked and not utilized even after moving to SmackDown Live. So fine, if doing it the right way isn't going to get him anywhere, he's going to follow his friend's lead and take what he wants, more or less. Great way to use Sami Zayn. I hope they keep it up. But the other actual news is that it appears, at least as of this recording, I haven't heard any more about for sure. Let me check just to be sure on WWE.com, but at least as of this recording, Adrian Neville has apparently quit WWE. Is either sitting out his contract, or they won't release him, or has formally requested his release and just hasn't been granted yet.
Damn.
And okay. Yeah, nothing on the main news page. So here's why. He was put on 205 Live after recovering from an ankle injury. 205 Live is the ultimate embodiment of WWE not understanding how to book a division, with the same flaw in the division that Eric Bischoff had in his cruiserweights in WCW, which is, well, this is the division we're going to put you in, and you're never going to be treated as a main event guy, even though you're a champion, because we don't see cruiserweights as a main event. If you're going to have weight division champions, you have to do like UFC does and treat them as equals. There have been several times where, the cover athlete of a game or one of their stars who gets a movie role or something isn't always the heavyweight champion. It's a lot of the times, actually, the light heavyweight guy in UFC is one of the more popular guys on the roster. Conor McGregor, I think, can fight at the light heavyweight division and is now fighting in the heavyweight, and he's one of the most popular guys they've ever had. So you have to treat them right, and they weren't. And then you mix in Enzo Amore coming in, who's not a talented wrestler, who was put on to fulfill the need of sports entertainment on that show. And he takes Adrian Neville's spot. It really throws a wrench in everything. And it just frustrated Adrian enough to be like, I'm done with this. And a lot of people think this is the first major crack, but it's really the second. The first was Austin Aries just saying, you know what, I'm done too, after his match with Neville was cut from the WrestleMania DVD release, which not only cut their paycheck, which, you know, was apparently done because of financial reasons and the show's not making money, but that still hurts the talent. Plus the fact that it is a show of how little that division is thought of by the higher-ups. And if you're trying to build a division around some of the most world-recognized, world-class workers you have, you can't then turn around and say, oh, well, because, you know, money's an issue, we're going to take away paying you the only way we can by cutting your match from a DVD release and cutting some of your merchandising royalties. So that's a big mark. And I tie all this back into another big talent who left about a year ago now, or a little over a year ago now, and that's Cody Rhodes. He's a guy who's gone out. He's having the run of his life on the indies. He's probably making more money that he gets to keep on the indies, because now anything he sells with his name on it's his. He can command big money for one-off shows from major promotions. He works a regular gig with Ring of Honor, and while they'll never pay anywhere near WWE, you mix that stability in with the flexibility he has to do a TV show or do a, you know, again, go work a New Japan super event or work an All Japan super event or go down to Mexico and work with AAA, you know, or go work, work the Bola for PWG these last two events. All of that stuff means that he doesn't need the WWE machine to be successful in wrestling. And a lot of stars are beginning to take notice of this. And, you know, you read the rumor sites like NoDQ, there's a lot of stars who have been in contact with him, one of whom was rumored to be Austin Aries, asking him, hey, who can you put me in contact with? Who's booking for this company now? You know, what's out there for me if I leave? And that's a very scary thing, because I think what's going to take WWE down isn't going to be bad ratings, because they always have the network. It isn't going to, and they have international distribution, which is the same thing that kept them going in '95. And it isn't going to be merchandise, because, you know, we all just collectively blew our brains out trying to get our hands on 2K18, because there was like, you can finally have 8 superstars in the ring at the same time. It was like, oh, real Survivor Series match, I gotta have it. So that was a big thing, is they're always going to have ways to make money, but what's going to hurt them is they're just never going to have quality talent when so many of these indie darlings that have come in and world-class workers that have come in get treated the way they do. And this time, you can't even blame it on them going, oh, well, it's because they're pushing guy. I mean, okay, at the end, you could say it's because they pushed their homegrown guy in Enzo Amore, but the problem with the Cruiserweight division was happening far before Enzo Amore. When the Cruiserweight division was almost 100% indie guys, there was problems. So it's just this fact that until WWE figures out what they've got to do to push people properly and to make all their divisions champions feel like champions in the eyes of the fans, this is going to keep happening until the Cruiserweight division's nothing. And if that happens, the backlash from that's going to be, it's going to shy WWE away from taking these kind of chances again. And when they took a chance on the Cruiserweight Classic and the UK tournament and the Mae Young Classic, us fans were treated to some of the best wrestling in the last 25 years. So hopefully they learn their lesson and learn it quick. And taking off the angry IWC fan for a minute, the one thing you have to give WWE, and Vince McMahon in particular, is when they see a problem and they know their back's against the wall, they find some way to make it work. Hopefully they'll find some way to make it work that benefits everyone with this. And if Adrian Neville has gotten his release or will get his release, I can't wait to see Pac back out on the independent scene, because, man, that's just going to make Bola next year that much better. And I think that'll do it for us tonight. So for Nerd of the Night Gaming, I'm Kid Thunder DJ.
Fire47.
Shri Vandalaris.
Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Nerds at Night, Facebook, facebook.com/Nerds at Night. Also, if you're interested in Sailor Moon fan fiction or cosplay, there's also couple
of pages.
All right. Also, we've finally been doing work at the nerdsatnight.com site. We're getting the blogs put in place where you can click on different blog headers and see sorted out views of our individual blogs, as well as we're going to be, I haven't gotten around to it yet, but we're going to be setting up a better show page where you can actually find the YouTube links to all the past shows, so that if you missed a show, you can go back and find it easily, since we have to cycle so many off depending on how long they go due to our hosting. So look for more things in the future with the site as I get time to work on it.
Yep. And Cherie's my blog has been very active, so.
Right, and I've started some of my own too, so. And Fireheart needs to get active as well. But anyway, have a great night. We'll see you guys later.
Bye.